Xoş gördük hamını.
Salam Ülker xanım.
Necəsiniz?
Sağ olun.
Sizlər necəsiz?
Çox sağ olun, yaxşı olasınız. Hamını görməyə şadam. Bu vəziyyətdə elə bir vəziyyət yaranıb ki, bir-birimizi çox az görürük. Ona görə mənə elə gəlir ki, hamı bir-birindən darıxır.
Elədir, elədir.
Salam Günel xanım, necəsiniz?
Salam Ülker xanım, sağ olun. Siz necəsiz?
Yaxşı olasınız, çox sağ olun. Deyirəm ki, hamımız
Yaxşı olun.
gəlib getsək də belə o qədər adam ünsiyyətdə olmur da bu koronavirusa görə. Tədbirlər, təlimlər filan o qədər aktiv keçirilmir. Belə fürsətdən adam şad olur istifadə eləməyə. Nəsibə xanım, xoş gördük. Sizi eşitmirik. Yəqin ki, mikrofonunuz söndürülür.
İndi eşidirsiniz məni?
Hə, bəli, eşidirik.
Salam əleyküm.
Necəsiz?
Çox sağ olun. Cansınız, yaxşı olun.
Şəhla xanım, xoş gördük. Sizin də mikrofonunuz bəlkə söndürülür. Sizi eşitmirik. Türkan, gəl sənin səsini yoxlayaq. Yoxlayaq.
Salam.
Salam verin. Gördük.
Həm səsi gəlir.
Gəlir. Yaxşı eşidilir.
Əla.
Hər şey qaydasındadır. Bizim burada çatımızda var. Yəni bir məqamı da Türkan sən deyərsən zəhmət olmasa ki, kimsə özü sualı verməkdən çəkinirsə, yaxud ingilis dilində vermək onun üçün çətinlik törədirsə, o sualı chat boxda yaza bilər və sən sualı tərcümə eləyib ingilis dilində verə bilərsən və yaxud da yenə deyirəm, kimsə çəkinirsə, sadəcə sualı sən səsləndirə bilərsən.
Bəli, mən onu əlavə etmək istəyirdim. Bizdə bugün bir neçə səfət müəllimlərimiz var ki, onlar ingilis dilində dərs keçmirlər. Ancaq yenə də mövzusunu bilirlər, bizim qrupdadılar. Onlar çata yaza bilərlər, suallarını qoyacaq bilirlər və bunu ingilis dilində tərcümə edərək bizim bugün Master Universitetinin professorumuz olacaq.
Bəli. Sən onu indi hamı yığılanda saat 11:00-da bir də elan edərsən ki, birdən kimsə sonradan əlavə eşitməz. Ki onlar görsünlər ki, yəni istəsələr chat boxda verə bilərlər. Bir dənə şey Türkan səndən xahiş edeyim ki, sən bir moment xahiş eləyərsən hamıdan ki, hamı kameraları açsın imkanı varsa. Bir neçə dənə screenshotlar biz eləyək. Çünki sonra bu məlumatı verəcəyik sayta ora-bura. Bu yaxşı düşdündə, yəni kameralar bağlı olanda biraz yaxşı görsənmir. Könül xanım, xoş gördük. Şadam sizi görməyə. Elşad müəllim sizi də.
Mən hamınızı salamlayıram.
Necəsiniz? Onu danışırdıq ki, biraz hamı bir-birindən darıxır. İşə gəlib getsək də o qədər yığılmırıq, o qədər həmişəki kimi görüşmürük.
İnşallah az qalıb da.
Bəli.
Bizdə olsun. Hər şey qaydasına əsas odur ki, indi qələbə əldə eləyək.
Bəli, hamımızın bir fikrimiz var, bir hədəfimiz var. Biz də öz növbəmizdə, yəni biz müəllimlər nə bacarırıq? Nəsə bilmək. Bizim silahımız budur. Biz də gərək öz üzərimizdə çalışaq, işləyək ki, inşallah dərslər bərpa olunanda bütün o boşluqları dolduraq və o arada olan tələbələrdə olan problemləri həll eləyək və o boş keçirilən vaxtı 2 qat qüvvəmizlə çalışaq ki, bərpa eləyək, dövlətimizə belə xidmət eləyək.
Hamıya salam, xoş gördük.
Xoş gördük Kazban xanım, şadam sizi görməyə.
Mən hamınızı.
Necəsiniz?
Yaxşı olasınız, çox sağ olun. Vəziyyətimiz də düzəlsəydi, lap əla olardı.
İnşallah, inşallah. Tezliklə sevinək, torpaqlarımız bütövlüklə geri qayıtsın. Reyhan xanım, xoş gördük. Rumella xanım, xoş gördük. Nigar xanım, siz də buradasınız deyəsən. Hə?
Nigar bizim Nigar'dı.
Bu bizim Nigar'dır, amma
Bəli.
dedi, o birisi Nigar'da olmalıdır. Nigar, salam əzizim.
Evet.
Xoş gördük İlker xanım.
Hoş gördük, hoş gördük Reyhan xanım. Nə var, nə yox?
Sağ olun, yaxşı olasınız. Siz necəsiniz?
Yaxşı olasınız, çox sağ olun.
Peki olsun.
Salam Ülker xanım.
Hoş gördük Handan
Herkese
müəllim.
salamlar.
Hər kəsə salamlar. Deməli,
İlker xanım,
aparacaq. Mən xahiş edirəm ki, hamı onun instruksiyasını qulaq assın. O nə deyirsə, onu eləyək ki, təlimimiz qaydasında keçsin. Kimsə nəsə demək istəyirdi.
Yəni mən soruşurdum dərslər barəsində. İnşallah birinci gün başlayır dərslər. Əslində birinci gün başlamalıdır bu ideya.
Hamı gözləyir də, yəni biz gözləyirik.
Yəni rəsmi bir məlumat
qərargahdan, nazirlikdən. Yəqin ki, 5-ci günə
Salam, hər
xəbər
vaxtınız xeyir.
deyiləcək. Hələ ki, elə bir xəbər yoxdur. Sadəcə xəstələnlərin sayının hələ də çox yüksək olmağı biraz məndə şübhə yaradır ki, bu dərslər şəkli formatda keçməsində. Amma görək, yəqin ki, rəsmi bəyanatlar veriləcək.
Salam, hər vaxtınız xeyir.
Xoş gördük hamınızı.
Səhv eləmirəm, zapis qoşuludur, yoxsa necə? Məndə
Bəli, bəli, bəli.
Türkan, sən rəsmi elanları ilə ki, biz görüşümüzü başlayanda müəllimlərimiz artıq bilsin də, sən nə elan eləmək istəyirsənsə onu elə.
Bizim qrup artıq qoşuldu, biz başlayalım. Okay, I think now we should start. Hello, colleagues. We are very happy to welcome you here in such a good time for our country and generally the world. So today's session will be about problem-based learning. Our sessions will continue tomorrow, 30th of October. Now I would love to give the voice over to Luka Handan to welcome you as well.
Hello to everyone and hello to Professor Groot. Thank you very much for being with us today and for agreeing to give us a presentation about problem-based learning. I want to let you know that all these teachers were involved in our activities during the last semester, and they were quite active and interested in problem-based learning application. As Türkan mentioned, tomorrow we will continue, and day after tomorrow also we will continue our trainings and workshops. And that's all from my side. You are welcome, Türkan, to continue.
Okay, I would love to just give a little information about Professor Groot. He is a professor on health economics and evidence-based education at Maastricht University, Netherlands. Professor Groot, please, the voice is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me for this PBL session. Yeah, as Turkan said, I work at Maastricht University, where I have a chair in health economics and a chair in evidence-based education. So my fields of interest are both health economics and what works in education. Maastricht University is known for its problem-based learning. From the start of this university, it used problem-based learning as its didactic method. And since I joined Maastricht University, that is now more than 22 years ago, I have also been teaching in problem-based learning. I prepared a presentation for this. Oh, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So you have to give.
Very good. I'm just making a co-organizer so you can easily share your files. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I hope you can see this.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, I have to. Now I'll do it like this. I don't know how to. So, yeah, Ulkar has invited me to say a bit about problem-based learning. And as I said, Maastricht University is known for its problem-based learning method. Here on this slide, you see a picture of the Maas River, which is the river that crosses through Maastricht. On the right-hand side, you see a part of the ancient tower. Maastricht City is an ancient city built in the Roman times. The origins date back to the 2nd century when the city was founded. Maastricht is known, of course, for the Maastricht Treaty. Maastricht was the place where the treaty for the unification of the European Union was signed. Since 1974, Maastricht also has a university. So it's an old city with a relatively young university. Okay, to see how to get to the next slide here. Then I do it like this. The Maastricht University was established in 1974. So it's the youngest university in the Netherlands. And the first faculty that was established was the Faculty of Medicine. Later on, other faculties were added as well, including the Faculty of Economics. And as it was a young university, a new university, it had to find its place within the university, the academic landscape in the Netherlands. As a unique selling point, the university decided to adopt an innovative way of teaching, namely problem-based learning. And I think the main difference, or what is usually emphasized, that the difference between the more traditional ways of teaching and the way that we teach here in Maastricht is that traditional way or conventional ways of teaching are more teacher-centered. Before I came to work here in Maastricht, I worked at the University of Amsterdam and the University of Leiden, where you just gave lectures and occasionally maybe do some workshops where issues or problems were discussed or presented to students. So it was mostly based on what you, as a teacher, wanted to convey to students. mainly based on lectures that you give. Also very discipline oriented, and mostly what I did before was teach economics. So based on a specific discipline that you teach. Now the main difference between these conventional ways of teaching and problem-based learning is that problem-based learning is more student-centered. It requires an active role of students. The core of problem-based learning is the discussions that take place in the tutorials, in which the teacher or the tutor, as it is called in the tutorial groups, play only a very minor role. And the lead in the discussion and the lead in the acquisition of knowledge is taken by students themselves, who discuss problems, come up with learning goals, the goals, what they want to learn, search for answers to these learning goals in the literature, and present their findings again in the tutorial group. So it's very much centered around the involvement and the participation of students. So it's more active form of learning for students who discuss issues presented to them. And it's also a small scale way of teaching. It's I think also what it makes it different from the conventional ways of teaching, that you don't lecture for large student groups, but that the tutorial groups consist of 12, maximum 15 students who among themselves discuss these problems in the way that I just presented them. I think another difference with the conventional ways of teaching is that it's not discipline based, but it's based on themes. It's based on specific problems or topics. We don't teach a course on say, within economics, you have microeconomics, macroeconomics. No, you don't teach a course on microeconomics or macroeconomics. No, you teach a course on issues in the labor market. And then you look at it from different disciplinary perspectives. As it's this problem-based learning was first developed within the medical sciences, and it's very much also caters to the needs of medical science. You don't teach disciplines in medical science, autonomy or any other disciplines that you have. No, you teach about problems, say, respiration problems or problems related to headaches or problems related to your stomach or any other part. So it's much more. I think that's good to understand. It's it much more relates to the problems that patients come to their physician with. Patients come to the doctor saying, "I have a pain here," and then the doctor, the physician, looks at it from the different perspectives that you can have on a specific problem. Now that's very much how problem-based learning is organized as well. Not disciplinary, but based on themes on specific problems. Also, what is I think in which it differs is the integration of theory and practice. It starts with a practical problem. And then it uses theory and different theoretical perspectives to provide answers to these practical problems. So students learn to apply theoretical notions. They learn theories, but they also learn to apply these theories to specific problems. That is, I think, what is very specific about PBL. So the basic principles are that it's student-centered, that the students take the lead in the discussion groups. It's based on cooperation in small groups, the tutorial groups, in which all students are supposed to play an active role. I think one of the pitfalls of PBL is that students try to free write within a tutorial group, that they don't actively participate in the group, don't contribute to the discussion, don't contribute to providing the answers to the learning goals, but free write on what other students in the group do. And actually the role of the tutor is actually to ensure that everyone is actively engaged and everyone contributes to the tutorial group. So it's student-centered and based on cooperation. It's also problem-based, hence the name problem-based learning, based on problems that can be small problems that can be addressed within a week. And mostly the scope of a tutorial meeting is 1 week, or it can be bigger, and that you have more project-based forms of teaching. There can also be that they work on the project collaboratively over a couple of weeks or even a whole unit. We have units of 8 weeks, two units of 8 weeks in the first semester, and then a unit of 4 weeks. So it's 8-8-4 in one semester, and then in the second semester it's again 2 units of 8 weeks and 1 unit of 4 weeks. So they can also, in the project approach, work on a project for 4 or 8 weeks. It's also what is also, I think, typical is that alongside the tutorial groups, there are skills trainings organized. So apart from the tutorial meetings that the students participate in, there are also skills trainings organized, and these skills trainings can be on a multitude of things. We have academic skills trainings where students learn to write academically, or where they learn to present for an academic community. But there are also skills training in, for example, using Excel, or using Stata or SPSS, statistical software. There are, for the medical students, there are also skills training in developing social skills and communication skills for students. So these skills trainings can be differ quite a bit, both academically and more professional skills that are being trained during these skills training alongside the tutorial groups. Then what is specific for the medical training is that there is a gradual transition from theoretical learning to practical training. In the first year, they have about 90% theoretical training and 10% practical training. By the end, by the 6th year, the medical training is 6 year, or basic medical training is 6 year. It's the reverse, then it's 90% practical training and 10% theoretical learning that they do. As I said, the units are thematic units, so it's not the disciplinary courses that we teach, but these are thematic units. So, for example, in the units that I teach, for example, a unit on organization of healthcare. I work together with organizational scientists, sociologists, political scientists. So together we form what they call a planning group, and the planning group, which usually 4 or 5 people, is responsible for the planning and the organization and the content of the unit. So it's not that you as a lecturer, as a professor, just decide on your own about the content of the course and the way it's offered. No, you always do that within the planning group, which is multidisciplinary, in collaboration with others. And that I consider myself to be also one of the main advantages of problem-based learning, that there is this peer review among colleagues, and collaboration, and that you also are accountable to your peers within the planning group about the content and the quality of the course that you teach. And I think in itself that very much helps to improve quality of teaching in PBL. There is also for the assessment, there's also forms of formative assessment. There's not only grading, evaluation afterwards, but there's also forms of formative assessment that take place, where students during the course can do tests just to see whether they have mastered the content of the course and what they haven't mastered. One thing I myself do, for example, in the courses is use Kahoots. The Kahoots, these are forms of multiple choice questions, where at the beginning of the course I present a Kahoot with questions about which are addressed in the course, and then students themselves can see what skills or what theories, what of the content of the course they have already mastered, and where they are still deficient and need to update their knowledge and skills. So forms of formative testing are also part of the PBL system. The PBL itself is of course also a way in which students develop their professional skills. They have to work together within the tutorial group. They have to contribute to the discussion. They have to collaborate within the tutorial group. So it's also a way to promote students' professional behavior. I already said one thing that also is part of the role of the tutor, but also which is done among students themselves, is to avoid students free riding on the contributions to the tutorial group by other students, and that is of course part of also the development of professional behavior among students. Now finally, there's also student mentoring and counseling that is being done. Now, why was this done? This change, as already mentioned at the beginning, Maastricht University is the youngest university in the Netherlands, established in 1974, and by that time it had to find a niche, a place for itself, to show its value added relative to the existing and more established, at that time at least, more established universities. And well, it did so by the total use of problem-based learning throughout its entire curriculum. And that was at that time quite a revolutionary change, because all other universities had conventional forms of teaching. And also something that gave Maastricht University competitive advantage. There were many students, especially in the 1970s, 80s, and also I think still in the 1990s, who came to Maastricht because of its problem-based learning approach. That was still is, I think, quite attractive for students, and it's a way in which this university grew. Currently, we have about 30,000 students and staff, but it's a way how this university developed by attracting students by using this problem-based learning method as a competitive advantage. Over the years, other universities in the Netherlands and elsewhere as well have taken over part of the key elements of the teaching methods here in Maastricht University. So nowadays, many universities have small-scale groups, have more student-centered learning. There are even other universities like Erasmus universities who have also taken over problem-based learning. So the competitive advantage that Maastricht University had at the beginning has eroded a bit. But that was the main reason to implement this problem-based learning at Maastricht University. There were also other reasons. The idea that the complexity of of problems or our societies made that you couldn't solve problems by a disciplinary approach, but that you needed a more integrated or multidisciplinary approach to address problems in society, including, of course, medical problems. So a more integrated form of learning was at that time also thought to be better than a disciplinary-based approach. That also coincided, of course, with the expansion of information. And I think also the more emphasis that we nowadays put on research skills. I think one of the main changes in also even within university, but also in other forms of higher education, is the greater emphasis on research skills and the use of academic research to solve practical problems. The more evidence-based approach that we see not only in medical science, the physicians work based on the best available scientific evidence on treatment of patients, but also in other areas we see a more integration between academics, science, academic knowledge, and practical work. That made that students need to know more about research, about doing research, and also how to find, retrieve, process, and use scientific evidence. And that is also part of the problem-based learning curriculum. And also a final reason was more based on the skills. I think another development that we've seen also within the medical field is the greater emphasis on social skills, on communication skills, on co-determination in solving problems, in active patient engagement, and that meant that students need to acquire more of these skills, more of these social skills, and rather than just the theoretical notions and it's not sufficient anymore to be a good doctor. You also have to be an empathic person and be able to communicate with your patients and with your colleagues and with other stakeholders in the medical field. So yeah, this is an overview of what we think that the advantages are of problem-based learning relative to conventional ways of teaching. The idea is that a more student-centered approach increases motivation of students, and because it's more active involvement of students, it activating learning system of PBL that is increasing their motivation. It's more activating learning that also increases retention, reduces student dropout if they're more actively involved in their own learning. The more integrated form or multidisciplinary forms of teaching based on problems rather than theoretical notions within disciplines increases the applicability of knowledge. You make knowledge more useful in solving practical problems. The collaborative way of working within the tutorials that helps to develop interpersonal skills, social skills, communication skills of students. The emphasis on problem solving, on problems that students discuss, makes also their teaching and their study more relevant. The fact that they're also more self-responsible for what they learn and the learning goals that they set themselves makes also that they develop more professional skills, and in professional life you also more responsible for that sort of for what you learn and where you find information and knowledge. And also, well, the progressive learning also makes that helps to is a part of more lifelong learning for students. Now, the reasons why I still think after 20 years Problem-based learning is a good way to teach, although I also think that it needs developing. And you also see that it was developed in the 1970s and also has some of the typical features of what were then in vogue in fashion in the 1970s, like brainstorming is part of it. Which is very much what was done in the 1970s, but there's still, I think, it's a very the student-centered, small-scale learning is still very much preferred over the conventional ways of teaching. So it's the reason to favor it. Well, are listed here. It's more active learning, more understanding than reproducing knowledge. That I think is also you try that they understand things more rather that they're able to replicate it on a during an exam or test. It's more motivating because it's more related to the professional life later on and working on real life skills. More problem-solving approach, also based on the empirical cycle. It very much also resembles the empirical cycles, where you have start with a problem, formulate a research question, acquire information, data, and answer the questions that you have. A more integrated or holistic approach. The idea that there's not just one discipline that can answer or provide answers to social or any other problems. The skills of independent information acquisition, I think very much useful in the current day and age, where there's so much information going around, there's so much work, so much academic publication that you have to have the skills to find the most useful or the relevant and the best quality evidence from all the whole huge amount of knowledge that is going around. We also expect that based more on understanding than replication, it leads to better knowledge retention and preparation for lifelong learning. The teamwork with peers, that also helps to develop professional skills. Also the more closer contact with staff. As Peter said, it's not that you are there ex cathedra in the lecture hall and the students are in the somewhere in the distance and sitting there with a few hundred students. No, they have small groups of 12 to 15 students with whom you go through this 8-week unit. And which you also have more time for interaction with students, and also the communication and leadership skills that they develop in participating in these tutorial groups. Now, there's been quite a lot of evidence on the effectiveness of PBL. That we have here a whole section that evaluates all courses. All courses are being evaluated, student evaluation, but there's also a lot of research being done on the learning effectiveness of elements or aspects of PBL. And well, what of course that may be a bit biased as it's done by researchers from our own university, but in general, I think. Especially in the medical field, where you have more also national standards for knowledge and skills acquisition for physicians, we find that students' knowledge levels are comparable to that from more teacher-centered curricula. So it's not that the multidisciplinary problem-based approach makes that they are less knowledgeable about the theories that they need to know. They have more employability skills and more collaborate. We know that they're better able to present themselves. They have more better communication skills and are more used to working together with others, also people with other disciplinary backgrounds. So that's they score higher on these skills, at least as far as they're rated by employers. We also had, at least at the beginning, a better, more higher efficiency, lower dropout rates of students, shorter time until graduation for students. Although, as I said, many other studies, many other universities in the Netherlands have taken over problem-based learning, And nowadays also teach some form of student-centered learning. So the differences between universities have reduced a bit. I will also find that students we check, I think, more motivated students to be part of them who explicitly choose for Maastricht because of problem-based learning approach. So it also has positive effects on students' interest in the discussion in the topic that they study. Now, this is a picture of a tutorial group. This is usually how it goes. This is actually in one of the tutorial rooms where I teach as well. We still have large lecture halls. So it's not that there are no lectures being given, but the emphasis is on the tutorial group. So if you look at the architecture of the university buildings, we have a few in the middle, a few large lecture halls or some smaller lecture halls, but most of these the rooms in the building are like this, small rooms which have place for a maximum of 15 students who sit around the table. On the right hand side, I think you see the tutor who discuss a problem. So there are about 10 students. It differs a bit between studies. There's some, so the maximum is 15, but some have 12. So between 10 and 15 students and a tutor. And the tutor is one of the faculty of the university. They are randomly composed, so it's not that they spend the whole program with the same students. So every unit or every new unit period, they are assigned to different groups. So they mix also with other students, and they within a cohort they have the tutorial groups with different students. And typically for the problem-based learning is that they have a tutorial meeting twice a week for 2 hours. Once somewhere at the beginning of the week and once at the somewhere at the end of the weekend. At the first meeting, they discuss the problem and set the learning goals. And at the second meeting, the students report what they have found in the literature on the learning goals that they have set themselves. So I will come back to that in a minute. Now, this is also a way to promote social context. So what you frequently also find is that students work together, that two students, for example, jointly go to the library or through the literature to provide answers to the learning goals. But also, of course, within the tutorial group, they have to work together and contribute to the discussion. And that's the whole process is based on what we call the 7 jump. And before I come to that, this is a sort of overview of what a average student week looks like, where they have on Monday a tutorial meeting where they pre-discuss the problem, the case for this week, and they have a tutorial on Thursday where they have a post discussion where they provide the answers to the learning goals that they have. And in between there are some practical skills trainings organized and some lectures as well. This is for medical science, so they have a lecture on visualization in endoscopy. So there are lectures as well. And there is time for private study. There's a private study in which they go to the library, or nowadays they more do it from home, where they go through the literature to find answers to the problems that they have. And this is the way how it's organized, how these two tutorial groups are organized, based on the 7 jump. So in the first tutorial meeting, they have the initial discussion, and that starts with reading a case, and a case is usually a text of about, well, less than 1 page, in which a case is described. So for a medical student, that can be a patient comes to the general practitioner office complaining about pain in the stomach. And now has a history of mental health problems and a history of diabetes, and what should you do? What could be the problem with the student? Or I teach courses in health economics, and then it can be a case can be someone has to go to the doctor, and he questions how is the physician paid for the treatment of the that he gets, or how can I how is the bill that I have being reimbursed by for the cost that I make for healthcare. Now that's the case, and first students read the case, and then there's time to clarify terms and concepts. There may be some jargon, and there may be technical terms, and that need to be clarified. And students can then indicate, what does it mean, abdominal pain, or what does it mean, health insurance, or so clarification of concepts. Then the group discusses about the problem, and they define the problem, and what is actually the problem here, and they have to find a consensus about the problem that they have. And then the third stage is, which is a very important part, is that they brainstorm about possible causes. So what is the possible causes for the stomach pain that the patient have, or what can be the possible ways to reimburse healthcare providers for the healthcare that they provide to patients. And that's also a part where actually also in the first part with the clarification of terms, where prior knowledge is being activated. So then the idea is that students say, I know from my own experience when I went to the doctor that he was paid for by the insurance company, or I know from other units that I've taken that this term means this and that. So it also activates prior knowledge. So they're built on prior knowledge. Now, after the brainstorming phase comes the conceptualization phase. Then the idea is that they bring together everything that has been said during the brainstorm in types of explanations. So usually I have those 3 or 4 or 5 types of explanations in which you can group the what has been said during the brainstorming phase, and based on these explanations, the learning goals are formulated. And usually there are some 5, 6 learning goals. For example, what do we know about reimbursement for physicians' systems, or what do we know about abdominal pain by patients? Now that concludes the first tutorial meeting. Then they have time for private study, and that they go to find answers to the learning. So if you have 5, 6 learning goals, they have to provide for each of these 5, 6 learning goals answers what they find in the literature too. And then in the second tutorial, there's the reporting, and then the report what they have found on these learning goals in the literature. And the idea is that all students contribute to do that, and that jointly there is a synthesis on being reached about the answers to the learning goals that they have. Usually what you have is in the second tutorial meeting that the first hour is being spent on the synthesis of or the reporting of the learning goals, and the second half is being used to initiate the discussion on the next case. So you have in the one tutorial meeting, you have the first hour is the reporting, the 7th step, and after the reporting is done, that takes about an hour. The second hour is used for the initial discussion on the next case. And that's the way how it goes throughout the curriculum, throughout the course in the program. So how is the general structure of the units? Well, it's topics. The unit has a certain topic, and within these topics there are cases. So for an 8-week course, you usually have about 9 or 10 cases that you discuss. The cases also have assignments. That can also be that aside from what they do in the discussion group, that they have to write a paper or give a presentation. So that can be also other assignments. There are of course also lectures. Usually the one way I do it myself is that after the tutorial group, you schedule a synthesizing lecture in which you more or less synthesize everything around the topic of the case. So if you have, for example, a case about health insurance, then I give a lecture after that on the economics of health insurance. Also, so that all students are on the same level on that. Skills trainings that are already discussed in the practicals as well. Okay, so that is what I had prepared for you as a presentation for about problem-based learning. And I'm very welcome. I very much welcome your questions or comments or any other things you might want to.
Hello, Mr. Groot and everybody. First of all, I would like to say thank you for a very interesting presentation. And I have a question. You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned problem of free riders. And we know that team-based learning, when we divide students into teams, lead to this problem, free rider problem. From my side, I solve this problem by, I identify the most passive student, yeah, and I say that you will be leader of this group. You will explain idea of your group as the end of that discussion, as a conclusion of it. And I would like to know your method, how you solve this problem of free ride, because we know that this problem we face very, very often, because when we divide students into groups, some students work very actively, other students just listen or just think about their own problems. And I would like to know your experience, your method, how you solve this problem.
That sounds very familiar. Yeah, what I thanks for asking. What I forgot to mention is, of course, how the groups are, how the process is organized. Once you have the tutor as is more like a process operator in the whole tutorial. Within the tutorial group, they assign a chairman, the chairman who leads the discussion, and a scribe. The scribe makes notes about the 7 steps, the phases that I have just described. But of course, not everyone is equally well skilled to lead the discussion. And well, free riding is frequently a problem, and that is actually what the where the tutor role starts, because the tutor is as a process operator has to intervene if that's the case. So what I do is after a meeting, say let's take 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes for evaluation. And say, how do you think it's going? And then they sometimes say, it's only these 2 students that only contribute, that are dominating. Sometimes also the reverse, that there's some students that dominate the discussion at the expense of others. We also had cases of bullying of students within tutorial groups. Everything happens within these tutorial groups. It's quite common that there are some students who have very little to contribute. And then, in the evaluation after the meeting, you can address this. You say to students, you should contribute more to the discussion, and also to the chairman, you should also say that all students contribute something. For example, in the post discussion, that the chairman says, I want to hear from you. What you have found in the literature, and that makes that they're less able to hide behind others and free ride behind others. So I think it's very much indeed about the management skills of tutors who have to intervene and discuss this if there is free riding in the group. or any other form of unwanted behavior. As I said, free riding is I think the most common way in which the groups don't function optimally, but there are also other things that can occur, and that's when the tutor has to intervene and discuss this with the group.
Okay, thank you very much. So you mean that lecturer must every discussion ask questions, yeah, ask questions and make students more active, some passive students active.
Yeah, the connection was a bit failed a bit, but well, the students themselves lead the discussion. One of the students is the chair of the meeting, but as a tutor, you can of course always intervene. And sometimes also if they another thing that frequently happens is that they are easily satisfied. That after just a few minutes they say, okay, we've answered this question. Okay, we have the learning goals. And then you also have a tutor have to intervene and say, now you should look what about this, or is there not more to be said about this problem? And so you also, as a tutor, have a responsibility to ensure that they discuss the topics thoroughly, and also that they cover all the topics that are part of the case. So that also in that sense, the tutor should intervene and put them on the right track or put them back on track.
Thank you very much.
We can move to questions, and it's just time for reflections and the questions. So if you have some questions, write in the chat box or ask directly.
Türkan, if you let me, I have just a question. Thank you, first of all, Professor, for coming and giving this interesting presentation. My first ask, it's not question, it's a favor. Can I ask you to share with me or with Türkan your presentation so we can send it via email to all participants?
Yeah, I will send you. I send you my presentation by email.
Okay, and my question is, actually I have two questions. The first one is that you told that together with other tutors, with other teachers, you can work in one classroom together and to discuss a problem from different perspectives and point of views, from different subjects and different point of views. I'm interested how you did it, because in our university it's not very popular. I mean, sometimes two teachers can be inside in one classroom, but mainly they are from one department and they teach the same subject. But to have tutors who are teaching from different perspectives, how you do it? Do you do it like inviting a second person like guest speaker, or just it is in your schedule or in your culture of teaching and how it happens? Is the first question. And the second question is, you mentioned that PBL mainly happening in small rooms, in small groups, about 15-14 people. Do it mean that PBL is only for practice lectures but not for real lecture, or I'm false? Thank you.
Now, yeah, the tutorial groups are between 10 and 15 students, where they discuss cases. But as next to the tutorial groups, we also have lectures, and in the lectures, you have all the students. So, say you have a course with 100 students, then you have 10 tutorial groups of 10 students who discuss the cases in the tutorial groups. And aside from that, you can have the lectures for all of students together. About the planning group, you organize a group and you develop the cases, all the cases that we have, we develop ourselves based on the planning group with people from different backgrounds, with different different disciplinary backgrounds. So that means if, for example, I teach a course on the organization of healthcare, that I contribute something about the financing of healthcare and the economics of healthcare, but there are also the political scientists who contribute something about the political organization of the healthcare system. So then we have cases where you can have one case about financing of healthcare, and you can have one case about the political decision making about healthcare in one unit. So, but that way they learn to develop different, combine also different disciplinary perspectives. One case and how that's done. Yeah, there is a planning group of people who contribute to the course, and then within the planning group you say, well, we want to develop cases on these topics, 8 or 9 topics, and then you say, well, you write a case on this and you write a case on that. You also find literature on that, and then you say, now we organize lectures on these topics alongside the cases. For that we also frequently hire or invite guest speakers. For example, in the course that I teach, we have someone from ING Bank saying something about the role of banks in healthcare, or we have someone from a healthcare organization who says something about how they're being reimbursed. So we have a mixture, I think, of theoretical lectures and more people from the field who give guest lectures. Yeah, and that combined is the course. The cases that they discuss in the tutorial groups, the lectures, the skills training that we have alongside of that. And that's, in total, that's the course. And for that, you make a unit book based on a unit book that has the cases, but also, of course, the schedule and the objectives of the course and the readings, etc. That's all in the unit book that you write as a planning group jointly with others.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So
thanks for.
I think someone has a question.
Yeah, I have a question if I can. Please, can you tell us a little bit more about development of student professional behavior?
Now, I think that's done in 2 ways. The one is the professional development that takes place within the tutorial groups, that they learn how to free write, that they learn how to interact and discuss with others. It can also be sometimes that they say, I found this, and the other students said, no, I found something completely different. Now, then they also have to discuss that. And that's a way also to develop their skills, the skills to collaborate and communicate with each other. So that's one way, what the professional skills they develop in discussing and working on the cases. Also sometimes on the projects, they also have joint project where 2, 3 or 4 students work together on a project. That I think is an important source of skills development. And alongside we have the skills trainings that we offer. And the skills training, that can be academic skills trainings, but also practical skills trainings that they get. That they, for example, I know that's a very short skill training. They have, for example, a skills training in using LinkedIn. As for your professional the preparation for your professional life, and that how to organize your page on LinkedIn so that employers can find you after you graduate. But there are also other practical skills the academic skills like learning to do the statistics or learning to write academic papers and so on. So different, so part of it is in the skills training, and part of it is what is done within the tutorial groups.
I think Nasiba Khanum has a question that she raised her hand.
Good day, everyone. First of all, Ms. Grodd, I want to say that we appreciate the time you spent helping us to know new data about PBL. Thank you for this. And I have two questions. First question, my worry is about distance learning, because educators must navigate in distance learning. And my first question is how to facilitate PBL online with students, how we must do this. And my second questions, I did some research about the PBL, and PBL system is often referred to as a heuristic system. That's why it's a collection of research methods that contribute to discovery of previously unknown methods. Do you agree with these methods? How we understand these methods? Thank you.
Yeah, heuristic. Yeah, I think it's a more. I think the whole system PBL is like I said more resembling the empirical cycle. So it's more how you do research as well. You formulate you identify a problem, you formulate the research question, you search for evidence for that. Students do that through the literature, and you report on that orally or in writing. So in that sense, I think it more resembles the way the empirical cycle of doing research. So I think in that sense, it's I can say more heuristic way of teaching. The other thing, we had for of course for a while during the first wave of the Corona pandemic. That all face-to-face teaching stopped, and we went to online teaching. So in online teaching we give lectures through Zoom, and also the tutorials are through Zoom. So I have tutorials like this, with fewer students, but with 10, 12 students, where we discuss a case. So we do it just similar as face-to-face, but then through Zoom, discuss the cases. Also for some, for the lectures, I've done it differently. I've done some cases that I just give lectures online through Zoom, or that they can watch through a live stream. But what I've also done, I've recorded lectures, video lectures, which they can view in their own time, and then we take the time scheduled for the lecture to answer questions. So then we have a Zoom meeting for the scheduled time for the lecture, and their students are then supposed to have watched the video lecture, and during the Zoom meeting they have time to ask questions about the lecture. And I think that especially the last thing, the latter thing works quite well. At least also what I get back from students, the feedback I get from students is that they're able their own time. They have more time to reflect on the lecture, and they have more questions prepared for the Zoom meeting after the lecture.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Roth. And now Maria has the question as well. Please,
Günel Hanım, we cannot hear you. Open your microphone, Günel Hanım.
Open your microphone, please.
I am so sorry. So I want to base my own experience about the PBL. As you mentioned, PBL is a great structure for students to collaborate within the teams. As group work is lead or guide members to do the group works, to collaborate with teams and to understand the content and to tackle complex tasks about the problem, and to build the deep knowledge about them, and to build deep knowledge about the core of these concepts. But we face some problems when we implement the problem-based learning. My first question is about the problem in the students' dynamic, as you give some solution about that. And as you mentioned about the 7 jumps, I want to give the question is, can we include there the benchmarking of the projects? Can we include here these steps of as the plan?
As I said, I think the problem-based learning also does calls for specific skills of tutors as well. It's not so much that your contribution is that you convey knowledge in the tutorial, but more that you're able to ensure that the group dynamics is positive and contributing to better teaching outcomes. So I think the role of the tutor is primarily to ensure that the students in the group work together well, everyone contributes, that they cover all the areas of the cases, and that they learn enough through the participation in the tutorial group. So it does do calls on quite a bit of on skills, how to manage group dynamics of tutors. And as I said, I think one way to do that is to have evaluation meetings, 5 to 10 minutes evaluation after the end of the tutorial meeting, to discuss how the problems that are in working together in the groups, and how students perceive that as well. Your second question about the benchmark of projects. I don't know whether you have to do that within the 7 jump. We also have project that they work upon, and then we organize meetings in which they present their work and get feedback on the projects that they have done, both by mostly by other students, but also by the tutors that they have. So, for example, I have in one of the courses that I teach, that they have to prepare a project about the economic cost of disasters, where they have to write a paper, a group of students, of 4 or 5 students, write a paper and prepare a presentation about the economic impact of a natural disaster. And then they present that to other students, and then that leads to a discussion and also feedback by the tutor. But that's done more or less a bit outside the 7 steps of the cases that they discuss.
Thank you very much. And Kalan has a question. Kalan, please.
Thank you very much. Hi, Mr. Wim. Thank you very much for your presentation. You talk about the positive aspects of PBL and of your learning method. And I have a question. What are the disadvantages of this teaching method in the long term, in your opinion? Disadvantages. I think the emphasis on multidisciplinary approach means, of course, that the depth of the disciplinary knowledge is usually a bit less than a purely disciplinary approach. So that you can see is one disadvantage. Then they usually they don't have a very. I think what they compare to other forms of teaching, more disciplinary forms of teaching, I think a thorough knowledge about the discipline is sometimes less than what you see with conventional forms of teaching. On the other hand, they're more multidisciplinary organized, and that may also be advanced. But I think the disciplinary knowledge maybe suffer a bit from it. That is a disadvantage. I think an advantage from a teacher side is working together. I think for the quality of teaching, it's good that you work together with colleagues, with other faculty members in developing a course, and that can also help. I think that's good to ensure quality. On the other hand, it very much depends, of course, on your contribution in this planning group, how much of your own discipline and your own interest and what you find important eventually is part of the course. So there's also group dynamics going on in the unit planning groups that there are, and sometimes you see that, of course, some people have more the stronger influence on what is actually in the course than others have, so that may also be sometimes that it's depends a bit on the group dynamics of the teachers, how courses are actually designed. So that can also be, I think, a limitation of the course.
Hamlet Aliyev has the question. Hamlet, you can ask your question.
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much for very nice explanation. Explaining, it was very nice presentation. It will be useful for us. My question about that: there are sometimes some students cannot adapt to the group works. It's a little bit difficult for them. How we can use? Is there any methods to use this? How we can adapt these students to the group works? And another one: how is there any motivation methods? How we can use another motivation methods to use this? During the lessons.
Of course, all these the group works also not always go well. You also have free riding in group work. I also have sometimes students complain that some students haven't contributed anything to the group work that they've done. I think that there's I think the what you can do about, or what we do about, is mostly the more conventional ways that you say if they well, one thing is that you give them tools to divide the work. So you say, for example, with presentations, they have to list what each and everyone's contribution has to be or was, and you say, well, beforehand you have to divide the work among yourselves and indicate what each and everyone's task is. And then afterwards in the presentation, if for some of these tasks are not fulfilled, you can also, and they say, well, that's because some of the group members didn't do anything, or then you can also, then we have sanctions, like that they have to do it again, redo it, what they have done, or have an extra assignment. One thing what we talked about free riding in tutorials, but you also have cases where students are a tutorial group that don't show up. Sometimes they borrow the notes from other students and don't show up. We have two sanctions for that. We have that they have to be present at least 70% of the tutorial. We have attendance lists which they have to fill in, and they have to attend at least 70% of all tutorials. And if they don't attend at least 70%, they have to do an extra assignment. Then they say you have to write summaries of some articles or so as an extra assignment that they have. So it's usually just by sanction. And making for the projects, making explicit what everyone has to do. That ways to get grip on that.
Thank you.
So anyone has a question? Yeah. Okay. I think I can ask a question myself. Has a question? Yeah, sure.
Dear Professor Groot, thank you for your presentation and sharing with us with your experience. I have one question about, you tell about gradual transition from theoretical to practical learning. Can you tell about it more detail?
Mm-hmm. Now, the gradual transition from theoretical to practical is quite typical for the medical field. I think I think also I do some consultancy in medical education in Ukraine and also in other Eastern European countries. And what I observed there is also quite a separation between theoretical learning and, say, seeing patients and practical learning in patients. What we have in the Netherlands, that's actually something that nowadays all universities do, is that students from the very beginning, the very first day of the studies, actually see patients. So at first, of course, they don't do any diagnosis; they just observe what physicians do. But even in the first year, students have a time in which they see patients and are confronted by actual problems that patients have, or actual treatment and diagnosis that patients have. So at the beginning, at the first year, it's 90% theoretical work and 10% practical work, for example, seeing patients. And by the 6th year, it's the reverse. And then they spend 90% of the time on actual patient care, on seeing patients, and only 10% on theoretical work. And that, and what I know from medical training in, among others, in Ukraine, where you see there is that to begin with, the practical training is very limited. And only starts after the after 5 or 6 years, where they have the first time where they actually see an actual patient as for medical students. And before that, it's all theoretical work that they do. And the advantage is is of course that it makes the work, their study more relevant for themselves, motivates them more. They know more what they do it actually for. They actually want medical students want to become doctors to treat patients. That's one thing. That's a better motivation, that they are more engaged in practical work. But also, at least for the medical students, some medical students find out after 6 years that they're not so suited for treating patients, either because they lack the skills, the communication skills, or just not so good. And if you start with practical training from the beginning, at least in or even if it's a small part of their time, you also students also get to know whether they're actually fitted for doing the practical work that they're supposed to do after they finish their education. And that, I think, is something that is, of course, more general, that applies not only to medical training but all forms of training, that it's good that students also get to know whether they actually are suited for and fitted for the professional work that they're going to do after they graduate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So, Mr. Group, I have a question myself. So, I think all these different types of the teaching and the learning, so need to provide more measurable effects, right? So, we are providing these different types of teaching for finding more outcome of the course, the measurable outcome of the course. So, taking into account all these, your presentation and our research about the PBL, do you think that PBL gives us more measurable effects of the course outcome, or how do you measure the effects that it's more effective rather than traditional teaching methods? So we know that the first one is the interaction, but when it comes to examine the students' knowledge, so do you think it also gives the knowledge and the skills at the same time, or it gives only skills to the students?
No, yeah, I think the traditional ways of teaching also give you opportunities to measure, of course, learning outcomes. All teaching, we like you, we have the Bologna process, the Bologna Declaration. And all teaching starts with defining the end terms, that you define to begin with the whole program. What does a engineer have to know after 4 or 5 years of study? What does an economist have to know after 4 years of study? What does a physician have to know after 6 years of studying? So it starts with the end terms. What do you have to know at the time they graduate? And then you gradually work back. What do they have to know at the end of the first year for their studies? And then you say, well, what do I have to know in the unit that you teach? What are the end terms of the unit? So you start developing a unit by defining the end terms, what they have to know by the end of the course. And from that you work back to the content of your course. In the assessment, in the examinations, you of course relate your exams to the end terms that you have. So that's of course a way to assure that a form of quality assurance, to assure that they at the end of the program they know both in knowledge and the skills what you have defined as the end terms of your program. To measure that, yeah, you do that of course by exams. We have what for example in the medical field you have what they call the progress test, which students can take, a large battery of multiple choice tests that test all elements of what a medical professional needs to know by the end of his course. And by this progress test, students can also assess how far they are in progressing towards a medical degree in medical sciences. So that's one way, and also to measure whether your program is up to the standards that you have. We of course also have that it's not sufficient, of course, that there is this internal quality. We have internal quality assessment based on the data, the objectives and the end terms that we defined. We have student evaluation. After each unit, the course is evaluated by students. Not only how satisfied they are with the student, but also asking them, what have you learned during the course? Did it add to your knowledge, or how much overlap was there with your prior knowledge actually, and what was the added value of the course? So lots of questions asked on that to assess that from a student perspective. So that's a second way to assure quality and to measure the learning outcomes. And the third way is we have external controls. We have the national accreditation organ, which every 5 years assesses all the quality of each program. So every 5 years we have to provide an assessment document detailing the end terms and what we do to the end terms and how we test for the end terms, how we guarantee that the tests are objective and that the quality of testing is done well. And then there is a panel of sent by the accreditation organ who actually evaluates that. And for example, looks through the tests, looks through the master theses that they write to see whether the quality is assured, looks at the quality system that we have in place within the university as a form of quality assurance. So there are various ways, both internally and externally, in which quality of teaching is being assured and evaluated.
Thank you very much. Why I ask this question, sometimes we face some misunderstanding about the PBL, that it's only a project-based learning and we completely don't touch the theoretical part of the course. And we conduct mostly the project, and at the end of the term, the students provide us the projects that they prepared during the semester. And so this is the only way how we measure the effects of the PBL. But yeah, it needs to be done in various directions, as you mentioned.
Yeah. I think if you introduce PBL, I think that also holds for your say traditional ways of learning. It's good to evaluate your teaching program, the outcomes And you can do that in various ways. You can say, well, does it meet the objectives that we have, the end terms that we have? Does it prepare students well for the labor market? That's another criterion that you can use. Is are employers satisfied with the graduates that they get from your university? And you can also look at it from it's also important to look at it from a student's perspective. Are students think that they learn enough during the course? Also, one thing we also measure, for example, is how much time do students spend on their studies? Do they spend sufficient time on it? Do they spend sufficient time on self-study? Is the study what we call, is the study feasible? Is it not that the study is too light, that you only have can manage to go through the studies with only a few hours spent on it per week, or is the study not too the workload not too high that they can't manage to do it within, say, 40 weeks spending on their study? So I think you have to look at it from various perspectives, both internally and externally, to get a complete assessment of the quality of the teaching that you have. And I think you should do that not only for problem-based learning or project learning, but for all of your teaching.
Thank you very much for the answers. I much appreciate this. So I think there are just 5 minutes left for end of our session. If you have some questions, we can ask, and very short answer can be provided by Professor Gurt. If not, we can, I think, finalize. Ilkhan, do you want to say something, or we should finalize?
I have a question, and my question is, Professor Gurt, during your presentation, you mentioned that it was a long way for Maastricht University during formalizing PBL system, and for a long period of time, long years, you're applying this, and you have really big experience. But we do not have such opportunity. We do not have so many time. We want just now try to apply it and to make it maximum beneficial for students. And my question is, what is your advice during this long period? What mistakes maybe you personally or your colleagues had, and you do not want us to repeat the same mistakes and the same gaps? What is your advice during your prospective view from these long years?
Now, this university started with PBL in 1974. So from the start of the university, we taught in PBL. So from the beginning, and we still do that now. So it's part of our history. I think one of what we very much discussed now here in Maastricht over the years is to provide more diversity in the teaching methods that we have. What we find here is that students find it attractive, especially in the first years, to do PBL for all the reasons that I've mentioned also during the presentation. But after a while, it also gets a bit repetitious and also a bit boring. That after in the third year or fourth year, they say, we're also always in the same mode of discussing cases and so on. So what we now discuss is to provide more diversity and to alternate and to offer different forms of teaching methods, and not only PBL but also project-based teaching or larger cases that they work upon. More in order to make it more continue to make it attractive, to keep it attractive for students, and not to become boring and repetitious over the years. I think that's one lesson that we have learned. There's much more discussion about more active participation in research over the years. We've also come to acknowledge that it's good that students also get more practical experience in doing research themselves. So, although the problem-based learning method mirrors the empirical cycles, we now say, well, we should also, especially in later years, also give offer them more research projects that they can work on. Also to provide more diversity in teaching methods. So I think one of the pitfalls is that it becomes repetitious. And well, what we do now is by also building it up, making bigger cases, going from cases, larger cases to projects, and from projects to research projects in which they participate. And by that way, you also keep students more motivated, and also helps to develop themselves to more research-oriented graduates.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Can I give one last question? Mr. Groot, it's interesting for me, very interesting. Give you to students beforehand any material, for example, lecture notes, or you give only specific topics?
No. They only get cases, what they discuss, and there's sometimes actually, well, there are two strands. Some scholars give a reading list or a list of literature what they can go through. Others say no, they have to find literature by themselves. So they have just to search for the literature themselves without any or many references. But I think what's most common is that students get a lot with you that they have, but lecture notes are not given beforehand. No, they lectures are usually after the tutorials. So as I said, sometimes you have sort of synthesizing lectures after the tutorial, and for that we now provide recording of the lectures so that they can watch the lectures. They can again if they want to, but we don't present them with lecture notes now.
Very much.
So I suppose no one has a question left. Dear Professor Gross, thank you very much, your time, your energy. It was really very thoughtful presentation and discussion for our staff, I think, as we are the pilot group who try to apply the PBL to their teaching method for a semester already. And I think we somehow found the questions, answers to all of our questions. Thank you very much for your time, and dear colleagues, thank you very much for participating and being active during this session. See you tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Please remember that we will use the same link for tomorrow's session as well. Have a nice day all. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy doing it. It was very nice.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.